The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
So I see we have 4 attendees in. We'll be starting on the hour, so welcome. So Sandy, I'm going to stop the recording so we don't have this 5-minute dead time waiting. Would you please remind me to start the recording so that we actually...
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you for coming to the webinar on the year-end summary report. I have with me today Sandy Ross from Chapter Services. Between us, we hope we can answer all of your questions. You are all muted, but if you have a question, if you click on the icon that is a hand that should be on the dashboard when you came in to go to webinar, I will be able to unmute you so that you can ask a question. I will plan to stop and ask questions at the end of each page of the form, but if I see a lot of questions, I will go to questions sooner. So I just want to make sure all of them. Okay, so what else? Let's see. So we want to make this as painless as possible for you, and I hope that we'll be able to demonstrate the value that this can actually bring to you and your chapter, especially if you had all of this information when you started your role as president last year, if you're all the outgoing presidents, that the president coming in next year can go in and get all this information will be available to them without having to look in a lot of different places. So we're going to start, I'm going to start sharing my screen. And I am going to go to the members pages of the website. And to access the Chapter Services Year-End Summary Report, you go to the Quick Links page of the web page, and under Chapter Services, you update Year-End Summary Report. So I'm going to click on that link, so that's how you access it. It's going to come up with a drop-down for your chapter, and you can either choose it from the list or you can just start typing. And I'm going to be using test chapter as the example today, and then you choose the fiscal year. So this is for the fiscal year ending 2018. Sandy, could you mute yourself unless you have a question? Thanks. So the very important point here is that you don't have to do this report in one sitting, but there are certain things that you need to do in order to be able to have your data saved. And we'll go through those steps with the form, but those steps are to review the form and then confirm the form. Those are 2 steps that you have to do. And if you do, the data will be saved to Chapter Hub and you can come in and continue working on it the next day or whenever you want to do it. The form has 6 pages to it, and the question, the review option is on page 6. And you can get to that page by clicking the numbers at the top right-hand corner of the form, or you can click next page at the bottom of each page, and it will take you successively to pages 2 through 6. You should not enter any commas in numbers or any dollar signs, and don't enter text into date fields or fields asking for numbers. The form can be printed after you click review and before you click confirm, and we'll go through that. And if you want to save it to a file, you'll be able to print it to a PDF. So I will be showing you all of that as we go through the form, but I just wanted to review these things before we start. So I see several people have questions already, so I'm going to stop for a second to see if there's an issue. Sue, you had a question? Sue Bucks, do you have a question? What about Darlene Carpenter?
No question.
Okay, maybe I just forgot to take your hands down. I'm going to reset the hands and we'll continue. Thanks. If you've previously worked on a form and you click on the link and the data that you thought you entered was not saved, you probably did not do the 2 steps we just talked about, which is to review and confirm. If this happens, don't keep entering the data in multiple times. Sandy, you're going to have to mute yourself because I'm getting feedback. Instead, okay, somebody is unmuted. Ah, there we go. I see it. Okay, sorry about that. If that happens, don't re-enter the data and keep doing it because you're obviously not making the 2-step process. Contact technology@assistancelink.org and we can retrieve the information for you. We can go in and basically finalize the form that you never finalized. So I just want to save you the grief of entering something multiple times and it not being saved. You shouldn't have that problem if you follow the instructions we're going to go through today, but I just want to mention it. When you're finished with the form and ready for submission, there was a very last question on the form asks you, are you ready to submit this form and upload the required files? If you say no to that, the process will end, but all your information will be retained after you do the confirm. And if you say yes, another form will appear that will have you upload the files. And the files that you'll need, and there's 2 additional ones if you have them, and that is a cybersecurity policy and a child protection policy. If chapters have them, other chapters may want to contact those chapters or see what they've done to come up with those. So if you don't have them, or if you don't have an auxiliary and you don't have a Sistines, you don't need, obviously there's no files to upload. And when the files have been submitted, an email will be sent to yearendssummary@assistancelink.org, and that will basically indicate that you have completed the year-end summary report. And if you have any questions, email technology@assistancelink.org. So I chose test chapter fiscal year 2018, and now I'm going to click submit. So the first form comes up and you'll see up in the right-hand corner the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a faster way to get to any of the pages instead of going through next page, next page, next page. The form is due within 30 days at the end of your chapter's fiscal year, and it's the outgoing president's responsibility to complete the form, but they have the responsibility for the form, but if they want to have the philanthropic programs board member update that page and resource development or finance update another page, that's entirely up to you at the chapter level. If you've already been in the form earlier than yesterday or the day before, you may not have seen these questions. And the reason that I added them was that people who did not have an auxiliary, when it came up with the list of auxiliaries, some people were putting NA in as the auxiliary, and what it did was create an auxiliary called NA. So to avoid that, I ask the question, and if you don't have either an assistings auxiliary or an adult auxiliary, you don't even see the list of auxiliaries. Test chapter does have auxiliaries, so I'm going to change it to yes. And now that I see that they have two auxiliaries, the adult, they call it adult auxiliary and they call it assistings. They're very creative in the names of their auxiliaries. The type that you would select is this an adult auxiliary, a young adult, or assistings. If you have another also known as or an abbreviation, you can put that in. If this auxiliary actually is no longer active, you can click inactive and then it will ask you for the end date. And we'll have to determine for next year whether we want to show inactive ones for historical purposes on this report or just bring up the active ones. But I'm going to leave this as active. If there's an auxiliary missing, you can click on add another auxiliary and it will let you enter it. So I'm going to be creative again and put young adult auxiliary, and I'm going to change this because it's obviously wrong to just adult and make this one young adult. And active, and I'm going to say today. So that's the way you add one. You don't delete them, you can mark them as inactive. The only other item on this form, and this actually was added back as a request from one of the chapters to list the accomplishments. And obviously you would have different accomplishments in this, but this is test chapter and I was just dealing with test data. So that is the first page. Are there any questions on auxiliaries? Okay, I see Sherry Ward-Weiser, you have a question?
Yes, we are in the process of forming an assist teams. We do not have all of the paperwork in yet. Do I list them or not?
I guess I should have another category. I would list them. And what chapter are you with?
Greater Collin County.
Greater Collin County. I will add another status, but for now just list them. And
Okay.
then before you're done, that status, new status should be there and you could check it. I have to figure out what to call it, but maybe forming or I don't know. I'll come up with a status, but that's what you would do.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And Linda Morris, you had a question?
I did. We had an adult auxiliary that was closed and ended, but it was like more than 5 years ago. Do you want that as an inactive one with the date?
I don't think we need it. I'm going to defer to Sandy, but if you want it, because this stays as historical information for your chapter. So if you want a record of it from its start and end dates, you could add it and then mark it inactive at the same time. Sandy, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I like that idea that you just said, Nancy. If they would like to add that for historical knowledge, that's great.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And okay. Just checking to see if there's any other questions. Okay, so now let's go to page 2. Page 2 deals with philanthropic programs. And there were a lot of people who started this form well before this webinar. And originally, you could not make any updates to philanthropic programs, nor could you add a program that was missing. We have since changed that so you can add programs. If you scroll down to the very bottom, just like you could add an auxiliary, you can add another program. You can also change the categorizations, the classifications. So and when you look at these forms, let me get up to the top. For testing purposes, I was checking everything to make sure everything worked. If you see a question that has checkboxes, that means that you can answer more than one response. If it is what's called a radio button or a circle like program type, you can only put in one. So if I make that Operation School Bell, it takes away community needs. Whereas with groups served, if this does not serve children, then I can uncheck it. And similarly with the subtypes. So these don't necessarily make sense because it's just test data, but that's just to know that if you see the box, you can check multiple in that question. If you see the circle, it's one. What philanthropic programs the National Committee is going to be doing starting in September, or perhaps before then, but at least by September, the consultants to the different chapters will be contacting the chapters to verify the information, get the classifications so that you're in agreement with them, the programs, and all of that information. And then I would think by next year, this would be read-only, and your way of updating would be communicating with the philanthropic programs consultant. I see I have a question from Jean. Jean, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. When I was trying to do this page, the names of our programs were incorrect. And what we discovered was under our Project Seniors program, we had sub-areas, and the sub-areas were all listed as a program. How do we get that fixed?
So you want to collapse them into, is that correct?
Yeah, yes.
I'd say I'll take your name and what chapter are you?
Inland North County.
I will get with Kathy Darwin, and someone from the Philanthropic Programs Committee will work with you to get that resolved. So then when you would bring this up, it would only show your group program.
So that, unfortunately, I'm going on vacation starting next week. Will it be done before next week?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Because I will talk to them and I can make the changes. So I think we can get it done.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Beverly, you had a question?
Yes, I did. Actually, two. So you said we can change the names of the programs that are as they are written?
Yeah, I'm saying yes with hesitation because I think what I'm going to do, if that's the situation, I'm going to put another field called new program name, because I'm concerned with what it'll do in the system with changing the name of the program. So you can put a new program name and then we can work to get it changed. So I will add that field today.
Yes, because I have one thing that's called Specialty Program for Youth, and I have no idea what that even is. And I don't know why it's there. All of our programs have names, for instance.
Okay. Trying to think what the best way with that is. Would it be helpful if I put a comment section with programs so that you could enter that kind of information so that we would
That
know?
would be great.
Okay.
Sure.
And in that case, I think I'll put the new, you can just put the new program name in the comment, if that works.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. The next person is Chris. Sure. I won't try to butcher your name. Chris, are you there? Will year started? She sent a question. Will year started automatically be filled in, or will I have to look that up? If it isn't there, I would say hold off on that, because I'm meeting with the Philanthropic Programs Committee tomorrow, and they have some of that information, and I don't know whether they are going to fill it in or you would have to look it up. So I don't know the answer to that exactly, but if you know it, put it in. If not, that's something over time that will be updated. Okay, so on this one, we talked about the program name. I'll add a comments field. You can put the new name in there. You can change the groups served, groups involved, program type, and subtype. If the program has terminated, you can put the year it ended. If you know the year it started, you can put the year it started. It's asking for the number of members that are involved in the program, the number of recipients for the program, the budgeted amount, and here you put it without commas and without dollar signs, and the expenses. So this would be for last year. And so that's basically programs. It lists each one of them. If there is one, and I have put different ones in just to test, if there is one missing, you can click add another program and it will let you add the program. With each of these pages, there are some questions that have options to answer, and then there are questions that are like the old year-end summary report that are just yes/no answers. So where there is specific information requested, this is asking what vendors, stores do you use? This could be for Operation School Bell. It could be used for any of your programs, or just where you use a lot for the chapter period. Since it's a box, you can add multiple. If there's some listed, some that you deal with that aren't listed, if you say other, you can add the other. You can put in what the other store is. We'll look at those other stores, and if there's enough people that are using those other stores, we'll add them to the list for next year. The other questions all have to deal with your program amendments and termination and your agreements. And if you click yes, there is no information there. If you click no, it will give you an place to put an explanation, and that's true on all the pages. So that's basically it for programs. I don't see, well, I see Sherry. Do I? Let's see if I see any hands raised. I don't see any hands raised, so I will go to the next page. The next page has to do, let me go back to page 1 a minute. I want to say that I do have community volunteers and that I do have a thrift shop. I'm going to say yes to all these so that I get all the questions, because when they were no, I was not, since I said no to community volunteers, it was not bringing me up this community volunteer statistics. So I do see that Sherry has another question. Is that true, Sherry?
Yes. Yes, back on the other page where you have, it asks you to list all of your programs. I am assuming that's for this year. We don't go back and list programs that maybe, you know, we had 5 or 10 years ago that are now no longer active, that they have.
I would
Is that correct?
I would say that is correct.
Okay.
Sandy, could you take that as a question that we can ask philanthropic programs? And here again, I think it's the same answer. If you want to historically have that information, because I'll be showing you how all this information is captured in Chapter Hub. My guess is we would not be displaying it next year for you to enter any information, but if you want to have it for historical purposes, you can.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we go back to 3. So it's asking for member service hours, voting adult service hours, non-voting adult service hours, and assisting service hours. And then community volunteers. So this assisting service hours only shows up if you answered yes that you have assistings. Similarly, if you answered no that you don't have community volunteers, it doesn't bring up this section anymore. So the service hours, the number of volunteers, and then what type of service, once and done or ongoing, and it could be both. It then goes into expectations, and it's textual information for you to enter the what you have as financial hours, service, thrift shop, and dues expectations. Under governance, it's asking if you have any membership classifications other than voting or non-voting, and you would just enter them in separated by commas. Do you have term limits for board positions, for chair positions, and the number of members on your advisory council? And if you don't have one, you would just click none. How often you do chapter orientation and the method that's used, and it could be multiple. What awards does chapter give? And this question came up this morning. It doesn't mean what you gave this year, it's what do you give when it's appropriate. And if you give another award, it will ask you to list what the other award is. Does your chapter conduct background screenings for, it didn't have no one before and people didn't know what to put in if they didn't do them. So I added no one. It can be multiple. If you say others, you can say who else you do background screenings for. And if you do them, it will ask who is the vendor. We list First Advantage, but we're interested in knowing what others you may have. If you don't click other, you don't see well, you do see it because you see who for the vendor. That other was for other people, I'm sorry. So the vendor, if you click other, it will ask. If you would, and my mouse is just frozen. 1 second while I put it on my charger. Murphy. Okay. So if I clicked First Advantage and didn't click other, it would not ask me who the other was. The next deals with the networking events, and it's just asking if you plan to attend, and this is more as a chapter rather than just one person, plan to attend any of these networking events. And if there's one that isn't listed, you can click other and write it in. There's only one membership question, and it's is a current Assistant Teens Auxiliary Consent Form on file, and I shouldn't have answered not applicable, but as I said, this is test data because I said I had assistings. So that's all on this page. And so we go to the next page. And one thing, don't let me forget, Sandy, is that I had intended to just show you the minimum you can put in to save, but we may as well continue now, and we'll do that when we get to the end. So from a finance perspective, they're asking, have you reviewed your insurance in the past year to ensure adequate coverage? There are a few chapters that have cybersecurity insurance. This isn't a valid one. So you can say, if you say no, it won't ask you for the vendor. If you say yes, it will. And similarly for a child protection insurance, and then any comments you have regarding insurance. The next question is asking you have paid staff, and if there's someone that you have that isn't listed, if you click other, it will let you put it in. The date the annual chapters budgets, including auxiliaries, were approved by the membership, and then there are the questions that you would answer with yes or no. And I have a question. Chris, you raised your hand. I think you can't, your microphone must not be working. Let's see what Chris has asked. Can you go back to expectations? I don't understand what you mean by financial expectations. And our expenses, the money spent on the cost of the program? Yes. Okay, so I will go back and answer those two questions. So first, let's go back to 3, and financial expectations other than dues are if you're required to buy tickets to an event or that type of thing. I think those, Sandy, are there other financial, isn't that what's normally a financial expectation?
Yes, it's usually a ticket cost.
Okay. So hopefully that answers your question, Chris. And then the other question had to do with our expenses, the amount of money spent or the cost of supplies for the, it's what you would put on your, this has to do with the programs, and where it says expenses, it would be the total expenses you reported on your 990 for that program, or it would be the sum of what you spent on supplies and any other costs you had for the program. And Beverly, you have another question? Beverly?
Yes, it's on the next page.
Okay. All right. And I'll come back to you then.
Okay.
Sherry, is your question on, what page is your question?
I don't have any other question.
Okay. And Charlene, you had the question about the program. Did that answer it, or do you have another one? Okay. All right, so I will go back to page 3, and now Beverly, what is your question?
It's on page
4. Okay, sorry. All right, we're on page 4.
Yes, you asked about paid staff. Would a independent contract with a grant writer?
I would put it in.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Okay, and anytime, Sandy, just chime in if you disagree with what I'm saying.
I will. I agree with you.
Okay, thanks. All right, just checking. No more. Okay, so the questions have to deal with reviewing with the financial and IRS statements and IRS being on the website, whether the board reviewed the management letter with audited, if you do an audit, it would be not applicable if you do a review. Did the board review the most recently filed IRS 990 before it was submitted? And if no, you can have any of these. If it's no, you can put in an answer. So now we come to resource development, and we're looking for what you're using to track donors and donations. Chapter Hub is the fact that we are right now starting to work with a couple pilot chapters to allow chapters to use Chapter Hub for donor management. Since you have all your members in there anyway, it would give you the ability to use one database and add your donors and community volunteers. So if you, so there won't be many that can say yes to that yet, but I just wanted to explain it. Other than that, it's asking you what you're using, and there will never be a requirement that a chapter use Chapter Hub. It's strictly to make it available to those who would like it. If you're using something else, you can, if you click Other, you can tell us what it is. The next question has to deal with the charitable solicitation registration, whether you're registered in all the states. If you say yes, it will ask you to list the vendor if you use one. It's asking what information you disclose on tickets and invitations, and you can check or uncheck the ones that you do. Then the questions are the standard questions that I think have been on. I think a new one is, has the chapter established a planned giving program? And that's, there have been some questions on what that is, and I may not explain it exactly appropriately, but it's basically where somebody puts in their will that money is going to be come to the chapter. So it's planned in advance. So are there any questions on the Finance and Resource Development page? Okay, then we'll go to the next page. And this one is strategic planning. They want to know what level you've achieved in GuideStar and the date you last updated your profile. And it doesn't have to be the exact date, but putting in dates make it easier to do searching. If you don't know, just put the first date of the month, and then the term of your strategic plan and the date it was last updated. And here again, it can be the first of the month. Exact date is not needed. Because with GuideStar Profile, you can lose your level if you don't keep it current. So any questions on strategic planning? And I see none. Okay, we'll go to marketing communications. When they say the date of last update made to your chapter website information, hopefully this is a date that's very recent, because if not, you're not keeping your website up to date. The questions with the yes, no answers have to do with including information, including the logo, name and logo on your communications, use of trademarks, and if the brochures, have you reviewed them prior to, with the Vice President of Marketing Communications prior to printing, and the things that you need to list on your website. One thing that I forgot to mention on the program side is, and it brought to mind the use of Assistance League. We want you to link your programs to Assistance League in any of your publications, but it is not necessary to go in and add Assistance League to every program as it's listed in Chapter Hub. That would just make it difficult for searching. The intent is that you make that correlation when you have printed advertisements. And Chris asks, what are you considering website information? And I think I may have answered it, but it's basically, we want to know if you've been keeping it current is really what it comes down to. It's a rather nebulous question, I think, but it's there. So now we come to technology, and part of the reason for this is we keep getting questions because technology as a board position is just 2 years old within the national organization, and it varies. In some chapters have a person, some have a committee, some have it as a board position. So we're constantly getting asked what other chapters are doing, and this will help us to answer those questions and help you. So what Office Productivity Suite do you use? And basically we're looking at Office 365 or G Suite, which is the Google counterpart. If you use an email marketing tool, the ones we're mainly familiar with are Constant Contact, MailChimp, and Vertical Response. But if you are using something else, you can put it in under other. Do you use an Operation School Bell tool for scheduling students? Recently, for those on the multi-site and those who are not on multi-site but have a WordPress site, the national organization paid to have Stephen Sherrard, who developed a package to help with scheduling students for Operation School Bell. And Reg Manager is one that East Valley has been using. And some people are using Sign Up Genius, some Spreadsheets, some MS Access. You can list all or none or other. And then apart from that is the tool for scheduling the volunteers. And the PTA signups is the equivalent to the OSB Event Manager that is available for those chapters on multi-site for free and those that are using using WordPress, because the developer wrote it for WordPress, so he has let us use it everywhere that uses WordPress, but he's not going to rewrite it for another platform. And then a tool for tracking volunteer hours. Several chapters use Chapter Web. I would think I should have, at this point, Chapter Hub is not tracking volunteer hours, but that is something we look to add in the future. Let's see, if you activated or significantly revised a website during the past year, was it reviewed? Does your chapter have an email policy? Does your chapter use TechSoup? Because TechSoup provides discounted software to nonprofits, so we want to know those who aren't using it just to make sure they know of its existence more than anything else. And then we're encouraging chapters to use role-based emails, and so we're curious to see how many chapters are using role-based emails. Let's see if we have any questions. So Chris asks, are you interested in what we're using currently, or should the answers reflect what was in place last year? We're transitioning over the summer, which is outside this fiscal year's report. One of them is, if you say none, it will ask you what you plan to use if you're speaking of the productivity suite. Sandy, you've got to chime in here. For me, I'd like to know what they're planning to use, but I realize that this is supposed to reflect what was happening last year. How would you respond to that question?
Well, I was actually waiting for you, Nancy, because these are your questions.
Okay. I would prefer that you put in what you're planning to use, because we want the most up-to-date information as possible. Okay. All right, so now we come to the only required field on the entire form, not because it's the only important one, but it's so that you can submit this report with as little information as you have at the time. So it's asking, are you ready to submit this form and load the required files? If I say no and click review, it's going to bring up a not really pretty report, but it is a list telling you everything you answered. We will be working on creating a report that would give a much better view of this information, because the goal is that we generate a report like this when you're having a chapter visit, and then we're not asking you over and over again for the same information, because we already have it here. But if you want to be able to print this, you can click print this page, I want to say don't use the make it correction because of the way we're storing the data. It's better that you just confirm and then go back in and change rather than making a correction. So if I click print this page, I have Windows 10, so one of my printers is actually Microsoft Print to PDF. So if I choose Microsoft Print to PDF, so I'm going to cancel, and now I'm going to print. Instead of actually printing, it is going to bring up a dialog for me to say what I want to call this and where do I want to store it. And then you can store it and send it to others to review or have for your files. But if you don't have Windows 10 and you don't have a Mac, because Mac has a similar feature for printing to a PDF, then I would ask that you go to the member pages of the website. Under technology, there is a section how to print to a PDF. And if you have Windows 7 or 8, it will tell you how you can download a free app that will let you print to a PDF. So we've now seen what we've put in. We've printed it if we want to. This next confirm is what is going to save the data. If I could change that to save, I would, but I don't have any control over what that says. So once I click confirm, it brings me back to this screen. And if I go back in now and update the year-end summary report and choose test chapter again and the fiscal year, anything I entered is now there for me to pick up where I left off. So if there's anything you get out of this hour session, it's that you must review and confirm to have your data saved. If your data isn't there, then contact us and we can try to retrieve it for you. But that is the key thing out of everything you've done here if you want to avoid having entering things multiple times. So since I'm not going to be doing any more updating right now, I'm going to jump right to page 6. And now I'm going to answer yes to this question. That yes, I'm ready to submit the form and load the required files. So now when I click review, it still will bring it up and give me the option to print. I don't need to print it, so I'm going to confirm. And instead of going back to the website, it brings up a new form. And for those of you who have looked at this a couple days ago, we ran into the situation where people uploaded a file, and when they came back in, there was no way for them to know that the file was uploaded, so they uploaded it again and again and again. So I just today, and it isn't totally done yet, I'm still working on it, added a field to each of these documents called last uploaded. So in this, for example, I uploaded to test chapter the assistines policy, and it says that version from January 1st of 2018 was uploaded on June 12, 2018. So if you're using the standard convention in your policies and documents that you put in the upper right-hand corner, the last revision date, that's what you would put on the version date. And then when you upload the file, it's going to save that information so that the next time you come in or next year when you come in, you will see that an assistines policy from January of 2018 was uploaded on June 12th. So if that is still your current assistines policy, you don't have to do anything with that file next year. You would just go on to any that you might have changed. So this will all be a lot easier next year. So you basically, if you want to upload something, you just click choose File, and you would click the file that you want. This is obviously not the right one. The version date, there's a slight difference in the version dates for the strategic plan versus some of the policies. So for this, our strategic plan for test chapter goes from 2016 to 2019. So I would enter that, and that's similarly for the detail plan. For others, it would be the month, so it would be 02/2018. And I see I should get rid of some parentheses, extra parentheses there. And similarly, if you come down to an annual report, and an annual report is no longer a requirement as long as you capture all the information on your website, but it is usually for a fiscal year, so for it I would put 2017-2018. And then you don't do anything with the last uploaded. It becomes it will be updated when you click submit. So you enter all the files you have. If you have additional files that you want to upload, for example, one chapter had a membership policy acceptance form that they have signed, and they uploaded it. So they could upload that as an additional file. There was another chapter that had their detail plan in 5 different files. What I would recommend in that situation, so that it's correctly reflected here, is for this purpose to copy and paste them all into one file and upload it. But if you can't do that, just choose additional files to upload the 5 pieces. And here again, with the additional files, you can upload another file. Any questions on uploading files? Okay, when I submit, you will get the message, if you have uploaded all the appropriate files, you are done, and thank you for completing the year-end summary report. So if you didn't upload all the files, you would go in and check the, go back to the beginning, go to page 6, say you're ready to submit files. You would answer yes and go through to get to the files. The only way to get to the files is through the actual year-end summary report. So that's all the pages. There, I have a question from Darlene. Darlene.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Is there a data limit for the document size? Sometimes this reminds me of a grant form, and sometimes there's a data limit on how large the document can be for us to be able to upload it. Is that a problem?
I will have to check on that. I'm sure there is. We haven't hit it with anything anybody has uploaded yet, because most of these are just small policies and such.
Yeah, I was just concerned if we take 2 or 3 things and put them together into one document, that it might exceed whatever that limit is.
Well, in this case, it totaled maybe 5 pages when it was done. So
okay, all right.
But I'm sure there is a limit. I would have to find out what that is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that's the entire form, how you submit it, how you resubmit it. So I don't see any questions. So I just want to show you in Chapter Hub. I'm logged, wrong one. I'm logged into Chapter Hub as the administrator for Test Chapter. And if I click on Test Chapter, let me get this out of the way. You will see that if I come down here, forget the files because I just did these this morning and they're not, this will show all the uploaded files. It shows that I uploaded an Assistines policy on the 12th. It then has strategic planning. It shows you the fields associated with that. So you can actually see all of this information for your chapter and any chapter, so that you can answer a lot of questions that you might have in leveraging information from other chapters. It lists the programs, it lists the chapter statistics. Ignore that error, that's a formula that because I didn't use real data. But the chapter statistics have all the financial information and the answers to your hours and hours questions. The chapter questions are listed here with all the answers. So all of this information is here for you to use, so that if you were, instead of the outgoing president, you were the incoming president, all of this information would be here for you to see without having to ask anyone else. So I'm hoping that you will see that there's value to you and to the organization as a whole in having all of this information stored instead of just being in documents. So Sandy, is there anything that you wanted to say? Because I think we have 4 minutes to spare, but we've covered all the information that we wanted to cover.
No, I think you've covered it all, Nancy. I would like to say that we feel like this is going to be such a valuable resource for the chapters as well as the national organization, because we get asked all these questions all the time, and there was no good way to come up with the data, and this is going to provide us with that. So we're really excited about that. And my other thing I wanted to say is anytime you have a question about this, make sure that you ask Nancy or myself, and we will get back to you as soon as we can with an answer.
And the best way to reach you is to use which email, the parliamentarian or your chat? Do you have a chat?
Yes, parliamentarian@assistanceleague.org.
Okay, well, let me see if there's any questions. You can start your report today. Some of these things that I said I would add won't be there right away, but when you go back in, they will be. So yes, you can start. Some have already started. Some have already uploaded their files. And if you're someone who has already uploaded your files, they won't have that last update. I will fix the ones that already did it before I got a chance to build that in. So don't worry about it, but I hope to get that done today. So if there are no other questions, I thank you all for your attendance and good luck in submitting your form. And please let me know if there are problems. Don't spend hours on something if I can answer it for you in a short time. Okay, thank you. I'm going to close the webinar now.
Thank you.
Thank you.